Iran and Turkey says they've decided to monitor the truce themselves. The Yemeni army has taken full control of a port city southwest of the capital, Sana'a. Al-Mokka had been under the control of Houthi rebels since November 2014. The former president of Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, is being accused of looting state funds before he left the country. A financial advisor of the new president says at least $11 million is missing. And so the main story of the day then for us is the negotiations taking place in Kazakhstan. Now, these Astana talks are the latest in a series of international meetings that have tried to end the conflict. In 2012, the then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan led the first talks in Geneva, but a deal to form a transitional government pretty much fell apart because of disagreement over the position, the role of President Assad. 2 years later, international envoy Lakhdar Brahimi, he convened a second meeting between the government and the opposition, but very quickly those talks broke down over a timetable for the negotiations. And a month of talks in Vienna, that was in 2015, they ended in deadlock, with Syria and the Russian government refusing to talk to what they considered to be terrorist groups. And last year, the current UN envoy, Staffan de Mistura, he convened another session in Geneva, but his efforts were overtaken by events on the ground as the Syrian military made advances. Now, with Aleppo in government control and a fragile ceasefire still in place, there is hope that perhaps progress can be made in Astana, although two key groups aren't taking place. Now, Yahya al-Aridi is a spokesman for the Syrian opposition delegation, and he says the success of these talks lie in Russia's hands.
It assigned itself to be the guarantees of both Iran and the regime. Now, to what extent Russia has leverage over them so that truce could be achieved or ceasefire could be committed to, well, this depends on their will, their determination, whether they are also looking at this thing from a strategic point of view. Now, being here, having all the parties together here, expresses that Russia is serious, but we want to see things happening on the ground. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. We haven't seen yet. That's why things are not quite optimistic, but we hope that they could turn into something, to a real achievement, so that we can go to our people on both sides, to every Syrian. Every Syrian wants to get to this saga, this tragedy, to come to an end. This is the point. Now, those so-called rebels, as they are terming them, came here and they are ready to go anywhere in the world in order to achieve something peaceful, to bring their country back to life. That's their basic goal.
Come. Marwan Bashara is here in the studio. He's our senior political analyst, of course. And Marwan, it doesn't look terribly positive, does it, in the first hours, the first day of these talks in Astana? What's stopping them talking?
I mean, we've seen that kind of bravado in earlier talks over the last 4 years. It's not necessarily means that they will not reach anything by the end of the 2 days. But yes, as you said, it doesn't look very good. Certainly, the regime is not happy at all with the fact that the opposition refuses to meet them face to face. They're snubbing them, if you will, because they want certain conditions to be met. And certainly the Russians are not really pressing both sides, and the Turks as well, of course, in trying to get something underway. Now, of course, the expectations from the meeting are quite different. The opposition only wants a ceasefire to be confirmed and to be policed by the international parties guaranteeing these talks, while the Syrian regime wants far more than that. They want face-to-face talks, and they want basically the opposition to surrender to their political diktats, and that's not going to happen.
Indeed. So they are being quite specific. Well, the opposition are being quite specific as to what they want to achieve from Astana, and that is an extension of the ceasefire that talks about the release of political detainees. And it seems very much as though the Syrian government is going there for different purposes.
Exactly. And actually, we've seen a leak, if you will, of Alouche, you know, the head of the opposition's delegate's opening speech to this thing. And actually, he was asking some other things that are pretty important. For example, he says, look, you want to talk about Nusra and you want to talk about ISIL, but let's also talk about Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, because these are foreign militias fighting on the side of the regimes, accusing them of terrorism, and they have to be sidelined and kicked out of this thing. The other thing that he also mentioned, he doesn't want to see Iran mentioned as one of the guarantors of this agreement. They don't want to mean because they're supporting the regime in a very bloody way. So there's a good, important a number of conditions, if you will, that the opposition is putting forward that I think is going to be important for the next 2 days.
So it sounds almost as if it's impossible to hive off the technical, the ceasefire, without the politics. The politics is always there.
That's very true. But which politics? I agree 100%, because there is no ceasefire without politics. But what the opposition is saying, we're not here to negotiate the end game for the Syrian crisis. That's going to have to go to Geneva. What we are negotiating now is the deal to continue with the ceasefire until February 8th. And that requires a number of things that the regime is going to have to stick to. And until then, the opposition is not going to talk to the regime directly.
Marwan Bashara, thank you very much.
You.
Now, the British government has admitted